Hi everyone and welcome to another video. I'm Nohan and today I wanted to talk about some historical fiction novels that I recently read and that you might find interesting. So as they're historical fiction, we're going to go through them in the order of, chronological order of when they were set. So we're going to start with a book that is set in prehistoric times, which is The Clan of the Cave Bear by Jean M Auel. So it's a prehistoric novel, which in and of itself is pretty interesting because, as to my knowledge, there aren't many of those for good reasons. It's hard to find facts about that time. And this book is the first in a series called The Earth Children, which mainly follows a girl and later a woman called Ayla. Ayla is a Cro-Magnon, and at a very young age she loses her family, her clan, in a natural disaster. And if it hadn't been for another clan coming around to save her, she would have died. However, that other clan are not Cro-Magnon, they are Neanderthals, and there are quite some differences between the two Homo species. Some are cultural, linguistics, habits, and Ayla can learn those. So that's not necessarily an issue. She learns those through trial and error, and it's interesting to learn about that. But the main differences are more to do with physiology and the size of their brains and the way their brains are constructed. Ayla has a brain that is well adapted to learning new things and learning new quickly and going towards the future, whereas the brains of the Neanderthals is geared towards the past. They have a very good recollections of their memories, but also that of their forefathers. So they're very much more geared in the habits that they have, and that makes them a lot more conservative. As you can imagine, that is also what makes the cohabitation between Ayla and the rest of the clan difficult. And the main character that feels very threatened by Ayla is the son of the... I'm sorry for the lighting. We've got a sun and a tree and my head, and this is going to be interesting, so I'm sorry for that. Anyway, the main character that feels very threatened by Ayla is the son of the clan chief called Brown, and it starts when they are children, but it is one of the main threads that goes throughout the books. The book is rooted in a lot of details, which makes it feels very realistic. Auel gives us a very detailed description of the everyday life, the way they find food, the way they hunt, the way they talk, the way their ceremonies are constructed, of the different relationships between characters as well, and you have to appreciate the amount of research that goes into it. However, because it's a time that we don't know a lot about, Auel also has to invent some of the stuff herself, and that is where the blurred lines start happening, because me as a reader who does not know anything about prehistoric times, it wasn't clear at all where the lines were between the things that are facts, like the food that they ate, for example, that we've discovered through teeth and etc. The things that have been based on true things but we aren't really sure, and the things that are completely fictional. And you have to admire, though, that this writing style that made me question things that I know aren't true. So in the book, the Neanderthals have some kind of ceremony through which they can share a consciousness. But it was written in such a way that I really had to convince myself, yet again, that that is not a thing that is possible, at least from what I know. So you have to admire writing that makes you doubt yourself in such a way. And I know that is one of the criticisms of this book, is that people say, okay, but she says these things were true in prehistoric times, but they aren't. And maybe that is where, if the book wasn't seen as prehistoric fiction, but as a maybe semi-magic realism book that happens to be set in prehistoric times, we would have a very different view of things. I enjoyed reading this. I enjoyed learning about the different characters. They're all pretty well fleshed out. Ayla, on the one hand, who develops into this strong, intelligent woman that is really struggling to stay with the people that she loves. We've got her adoptive mother, who is called Isa, who is the clan medicine woman, who has love for Ayla and who who shows also what it's like to become an older person, who is a woman that is okay with her role within the clan, where Ayla struggles with that a lot more. We've got Kreb, who is, for lack of a better word, I can't remember what they call him, the clan druid. He is one that, because of his role, he thinks that all of the conservative ways that they have, all of the habits that they have, are very important, and they are the basic things that makes the clan, but at the same time he's torn seeing his love for Ayla and not really knowing how to deal with that. Let's see if I can shift this luminous situation. There, that might be a little bit better. There was a plant that I had forgotten was making shade. It wasn't the tree, it was my plant. Anyway, so I really appreciated that the struggles that you have within the clan is not only the bigger characters that are fleshed out, but also the smaller ones. So you've got some nuance between how people deal with this force that is Ayla, who is just comes into their lives and messes things up for them. Also, they see that she does good things. They also feel, as a group, they kind of feel threatened and don't know how to deal with it. So I like the interactions between the characters in the clan, and that's what I think made the book very interesting. And the issues that they have are also ones that you could relate with, because they have to do with how you deal with new things versus old things. They have to deal with the position of women in the clan. There's a very strong hierarchy and the women are at the bottom, which is one of the main struggles that Ayla has. So that also made it very interesting to read, because it was similar struggles as things that we see now, but just in a different setting. I don't think everyone will like the level of detail that we get, but to me it only made me very appreciative of the research that the author has done to write this book. As I said, I was confused not knowing what was and what wasn't real fact, but it's only something that I was thinking about when I was pulled out of the story, because when I was in it, all of these details made for a very interesting world that I could kind of see come alive in front of my eyes. The criticism that I do have is the amount of things that are repeated and repeated and repeated. We are told over and over again that the Neanderthals have a different brain, that therefore they know of the memories of their forefathers. We are told over and over again that they have different bodies from the Cro-Magnons, that their limbs can't stretch, that they're more bow-like. We are told over and over again why Brown, the clan's son, the clan's chief's son, I should say, hates Ayla. All of that repetitiveness could have been edited out and it would not have made a difference, except that I would have appreciated more, and I think more people with me. Overall, I think the book would have benefited from some notes at the end explaining where the lines are between facts and things that we just don't know and things that have been invented, because then it would have been a lot clearer that this is not necessarily always how Neanderthals or Cro-Magnons would behave, but it would make it clearer that this is still a work of fiction. And maybe the label of calling it maybe a semi-magic realism book would also have, it would change our views and our expectations, and I think that would benefit it. I have decided not to read the rest of the series because from what I've read, we follow Ayla. I mean, I'm still interested in the character Ayla, but apparently she becomes, from this strong woman, she becomes a woman that falls in love and then is defined through that love. And that's not something I'm interested in seeing. I like the path that she had, and that's good enough for me. The other book that I wanted to talk about, quite different, but also one that is not 100% historical fiction, and that is Underground Railroad by Colson, Whitehead. I say it's not 100% historical fiction because it is also just normal fiction. The historical fiction part is the part where we learn about the different ways in which Black people were oppressed in the South. I'll talk about the plot in a second. But the fictional part is the Underground Railroad part, which, while it's an important mechanism in the book, and you know why Colson Whitehead put it in there, it is still a fictional thing. And I've heard of more people that they were confused as to whether the Underground Railroad was a real thing or not. And that is where this is a work of fiction, and that part is invented. Also, the characters obviously are invented and the narrative as a whole, but the Underground Railroad is the main thing that makes it fiction. Now, our main character is Cora, and she is an enslaved girl in the plantations in the South. She's been born into captivity just like her mother, and her mother manages to escape from the plantation when Cora is still a young child, leaving Cora behind, trying to fend for herself, trying to find ways to survive, to stay under the radar of the beatings and of the rapes, but also trying to find small ways in which to remain a human. And when Cora is somewhat older, another enslaved man accosts her and tells her that he is planning on trying to escape, and it takes a while, but then Cora decides that she is going to go along with him, and they end up using the Underground Railroad. Now, the Underground is a system of railroads with trains that are underground. It's all in the name, and that are used to help enslaved black people escape from the plantations and then go from place to place to go to a better future, if you will. Now, Cora and Caesar is the name of the man that she goes away with, first arrive at a place where they think that they have found a good amount of freedom. They have a job over their heads, they have a roof over their heads, they have a job, they even have some form of healthcare, and for the while they're pretty happy. But as it turns out, the jobs are pretty denigrating, and the healthcare has been put in place for very gruesome and racist reasons. Now, throughout the book, Cora isn't necessarily free. Her previous owner has sent a man after her to try to find her, and because she is the son of the only other slave that has managed to escape the plantation and the father of that slave catcher, he sees it as his personal mission to find her. So Cora has to go from place to place, and he will still go after her, and that is the main reason that she has to keep on fleeing. And she does that every time using the Underground Railroad and going to different places with different types of oppression and different types of racism, different types of violence, plain violence used against black people and enslaved people in general. And that is where this book is very interesting and very well constructed, because the railroad is used as a mechanism to make us go from not only place to place in the South, where we see these different forms of oppression, but we could also see it as a way of moving us through different eras in time. That could not have been possible with just one character, because the time would just simply have not been there. Now, this is a novel that is very jarring, and you keep going back and forth, not in the narrative, but also in the backstory of some of the characters that you meet. There are moments in time where you think that Cora has found a place where she will at least be able to stay for a while, and then there is these very brusque events that take place and you are propelled into another direction again. And I think, while that I understand that can be very jarring as a reader, I think that's very reminiscent of the lives of the people that were enslaved and were trying to flee, where you would never be safe at one point. You would never know whether you would be maybe slowly going in the direction that you think was safe, and then a train would hit you, a train being a white man deciding that, oh, I feel like raping you today. So I think that jarring aspect was purposefully done, and done very well. It's a very intense book. It's very intelligently built, and I would recommend it absolutely for that. It is more plot-driven than character-driven. The characters aren't very well fleshed out, but I believe that is to show that they could have been anyone. So I understand that choice as well, even though it makes that I don't remember a lot about them specifically, but more about the different situations that they went through. Would recommend. Last but not least, the only physical book that I actually have is one that is set during the First World War, and that is The Pull of the Stars by Donoghue. Again, historical fiction, because that is the theme of this video. And this one is set in Ireland, and it is set during, I think, 2, maybe 3 days in a hospital, I think in Dublin, but I'm not entirely sure. No, Dublin. And a hospital where, specifically in a very tiny room, all of the women are put that are simultaneously pregnant and have the Spanish flu that is ravaging the world at that time. See, every time has their own pandemic. Our main character is a nurse called Julia, and she's put in charge of this tiny maternity ward with patients that have big problems, and because of the situation at the time and everybody being overstretched due to both the war and the pandemic, while she does not have tons of experience, she has never been a head nurse of any kind, she has to take care of usually 3 patients. And luckily for her, she is helped by a volunteer, a girl called Birdie, who serves as a kind of runner that will go and fetch a doctor when that is necessary, that will set tea, that will change the clothing of the women, that helps her in that way. And throughout the couple of days, we see the jarring situation that they are in, the life of Julia, the nurse, but also we see the different ways in which the women come to bear children in that time during the First World War, and the relationships that they have with their husband. We see the different ways in which people think about medicine, because it is a time where, you know, penicillin started to be a thing and we started to have steps, but there were also still people that felt that bleeding person, what's it called when you put one of those suction animals on your skin to help take out the blood, that still believed that was a very good method. So we've got this little bit of push and pull. My favorite character, and the one that I would be more interested in reading more about, is the doctor, Dr. Catherine Lynn. She's a strong woman who is trying to push more modern medicine, but she's also rumored to be a rebel, so apparently there are policemen that are on the lookout for her. She's a source of strength in the general bleakness and sadness of the book. Remember, we are in a setting where these women tend to not necessarily survive, not only them but also their children. So I really like the character of Dr. Catherine Lynn, and also the character of Birdie was interesting because she has this force of nature and joy. Even that, it gets even worse because we learn a little bit more about her backstory, and then she lives in a very precarious situation. So seeing the joy that she has just makes it extra strong, extra impactful. While there are some interesting themes in the book, like the position of women in society through the nurse and the doctor, but also the different women that we see in the book, I can't say that in the end the book itself was very memorable. I think that has to do with the character of Julia, the nurse that we read from the point of view from. She fell a little bit flat for me, and I think that it has to do with the fact that she's just trying to do her best and she feels a little bit downtrodden, I think. And it contrasts a little bit with the powerful character that is Dr. Kathleen Lynn, that is this force of nature, and Birdie, the volunteer, who is this spark of joy. In contrast with those two, Julia fell a little bit flat, and that is why I think, for me at least, the novel suffered a little bit. Overall, it's still a good book, it's still easy to read, and if you're looking for something that is also easy to get through, despite having still complicated, interesting themes, I would still recommend it. Those were the 3 historical fiction books that I wanted to talk with you about, even though, to be fair, one is not necessarily historical fiction, it's more fiction, and the other one has magic realism, prehistorical fiction kind of vibes. If you're interested in any of these, I'd love to hear. Also, if you have any other historical fiction that you've read recently that you would like to tell me about, I'm always here for that. I'll see you in the comments, and thank you for watching. Bye!
Ba-chum, ba-chum, chum.